Hello, everybody. My name is Emily Dundas-Oak. I work with Massy Art Society, who is very pleased to be hosting this wonderful event here this evening. Massy Art Society is a newly publicly launched art society dedicated to finding connection, bringing people together, and storytelling through all mediums. We think that not only are books and stories in written form so crucial for our understanding and coming into the world, but it's that when these stories intersect with other political, social, and creative ways of being, that true meaning is found. So I'm so pleased to be hosting this truly excellent event in celebration of Jenn Ashton's People Like Frank, put out by Tidewater Press. We're so thrilled that we get to host this event and to welcome this very important collection of stories into the world. So a little bit about Massy Art Society. We've just been publicly launched this year. And so we do host a number of events, including book launches, readings, exhibitions, art events. We're doing some sort of audio podcast to be released as well. And it's really truly dedicated to interdisciplinary thinking and being. And I really do believe that this event embodies that. We were founded by Patricia Massy, who you might know from Massy Books. Massy Books is an Indigenous-owned bookstore in Vancouver's Chinatown. We recognize that Massy Books is in Chinatown, which is a historically distinct neighborhood in Vancouver with a very rich and very important history to honor. And it's also a neighborhood nestled within the larger territories, the unceded, ancestral, and currently occupied territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. So we do our work with that, sort of guiding our practices and our protocols, and it is from these territories that I'm currently tuning into this event. Um, but one joy of reshifting things through this new platform is that we're joined by guests from all over the land. So yes, if you are not in Vancouver, and even if you are in Vancouver and interested in purchasing a copy of Jenn Ashton's book or browsing any of Massy Books titles, we do ship across so-called Canada and the USA, and we offer competitive shipping prices. And Jenn Ashton's book is available, and for this special event, if you place an order, you will also get a signed copy. So please reach out if you have any questions at all about our ordering process or about, just what to read. We're always happy to make recommendations. Um, Thank you so much. Hi to Jenn and all the special guests today, and hope you enjoy the rest of the evening with gratitude. Bye.
Well, people, you can see us talking about tech stuff here, but I guess that's the usual thing that happens when we do things like that. This is all very real. Okay. Once again, welcome. This is a book launch for People Like Frank and Other Stories from the Edge of Normal by Jenn Ashton. My name is Isabella Mori, and I'm the MC for tonight. With me are Jenn Ashton, Waubgeshig Rice, and Ranj Singh. Waub or Ranj, if I mispronounce your names, please correct me. You'll get a full introduction for all of us later, but for now, let's begin by acknowledging that we work and live on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, as well as the traditional territory of Atikameksheng and Nishnabek, which is part of the Robinson-Huron Treaty of 1850. We'd also like to thank those who make tonight possible. Tidewater Press, Andrew for tech support, Petsa Petrovich for the intro video, Ranj Singh for our music tonight, our very special guest, Waub Rice, and also to Patricia and Emily from Massy Books. In fact, Massy Books has a 50-50 draw, and let me tell you a little bit about that. The independent bookstore Massy Books returns with their annual fundraiser for battered women's support services and Writers Exchange, offering the chance to win up to $10,000. This 50-50 fundraiser has reasonable ticket prices, making supporting these two crucial organizations easy. Ticket bundle options allow you to increase your chances of winning right in time for Christmas. Open to residents of British Columbia, 50% of proceeds go to a lucky winner. Could it be you? While the other 50% go directly into supporting victims of abuse, as well as to children's literacy programs. For more information about your $10 tickets or the $25 or $75 ticket bundles, go to www.massybooks.com. That's MASSY books.com/fundraiser. And we'll put this information in the comments also to make it easier for you. And of course, thank you to everybody joining in tonight. So, what we'll do tonight, you'll spend about an hour with us. You'll hear a bit of reading from Jenn Ashton and Waub Rice. There will be lots of conversation about writing between the three of us, and we'll have music by the super talented Ranj Singh. So, let's start. Jenn, why don't you read a small excerpt from the book?
I would love to. Um, this paragraph is from a short story called Mea Culpa. It's the first paragraph, and it is actually an excerpt from what is going to be another book. So it's a little story plucked out of it. Mea Culpa. My self awareness appeared early and made me feel like there was something wrong with me. It also led me to always feeling left out of the conversation, like when my parents failed to consult me before having another baby, or when they decided we should move. I knew too when I'd been wronged and treated unfairly, and I learned early on how to hold a grudge. I would have made the perfect little hitman.
What a great taste of your writing, Jenn. So let me tell you a little bit about Jenn Ashton. Jenn Ashton is an award-winning author and visual artist living in North Vancouver and is the great-great-granddaughter of Samilat. She is a director on the board of the Federation of British Columbia Writers, as well as the BC Indigenous Writers Collective. Jenn has just completed a year as a teaching assistant in the Simon Fraser University's Writer's Studio and is now studying at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. Okay, now let's get a taste of Waub's writing.
Okay, thank you very much, Isabella. Now I'll add your Ojibwe pronunciation was great. I think you have a bright future as an Ojibwe language teacher if you choose to. So I will read the first paragraph of Moon of the Crested Snow, my most recent novel published in 2018. And this is the start of the story. A crack echoed through the boreal landscape, a momentary chaos in the still afternoon air. In the near distance, a large bull moose fell to its side. Evan Whitesky stood and looped his rifle around his right shoulder, adjusted his neon orange hat, and began a slow walk over to his kill. The smell of gunpowder briefly dominated the crisp scent of impending winter. And that's a bit of Moon of the Crested Snow.
Wonderful atmosphere. So let me also tell you a little bit about Waub. Waub is an author and journalist from the Waubgeshig First Nation on Georgian Bay. He has written 3 fiction titles, and his short stories and essays have been published in numerous anthologies. His most recent novel, the one that we just heard from, Moon of the Crested Snow, was published in 2018 and became a national bestseller. He graduated from Ryerson University's journalism program in 2002 and spent the bulk of his journalism career at CBC. So here we are. Let's talk about writing. And Jen, I'm gonna just ask you a question right away. Why would you have made, well, not you, probably, you know, the main character there, but that sentence, I would have made the perfect little hitman. I want to hear more about that.
Nobody's asked me that before. I don't know. You know what? Let me just say that when I write, I don't, I'm not always like super conscious of it. Normally, my mentor, Stella Harvey, got me into the habit of getting up very early in the morning while I'm kind of still dreamy. And I just sit down and I write. So I don't choose what comes out. And that was one of those lines that came out. And yeah, some stories are kind of already just there in my head, and I just put them on the page, and I don't really need to do anything else to them. Um, Sometimes I'm dreaming it. When I wake up, I get up and write it down. But I think this one um, ended up, like I said, being it's a book length project now, and this is just a little first snippet of it that turned out to be kind of a whole story. Um, so I don't know why I wrote that. Um, the part that comes after is actually a true story. Um, so I don't know.
Mhm. Thank you for telling us right away about a part of your writing process. I mean, it's just so fascinating. Is that, I mean, I saw you nod your head, Wob. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, for me, I have sort of a different approach. And I was nodding my head, particularly about Jen mentioning getting up early in the morning, because that used to be my routine for a long time before our first son was born. And then, you know, priorities sort of shifted a little bit, and, you know, there wasn't as much time for writing in the morning. But definitely that's when I would sort of put most of my effort into writing. And I think it was mostly an issue of time management at that point. You know, I was working full time as a journalist, right, while I was working on Moon of the Crested Snow and my previous books. So I needed to take as much time as possible. And that ended up being earlier in the mornings, really, I found was when I was most productive, but also that sort of awakening moment that Jen mentioned. You know, I find that's really neat time of the day to sort of reconnect with the world around you after you emerge from your sleep state, right? And I think some of your ideas are freshest at that point, right? And you know, what may influence you from your dreams is sort of unfiltered. You know, it's still fresh in your mind, I think. So in that sense, you know, it's an opportunity to become a little more experimental, a little more surreal, I find. And I like dipping into that world too, here and there. And I wrote a lot about dreams and Moon of the Crested Snow as well. And I think a lot of that came from that inspiration. But for me, when I'm writing, I guess something a little longer form, I really do have to map it out as much as I can before I actually sit down to fill out the actual prose. You know, so yeah. So, but you know, I am inspired by moments like Jen mentioned, where you can just sort of let it come out and just, you know, let the story be itself, and then go back later and take a look at what you created, and you know, that can
Mm.
be a really cool experience too.
I just want to add, I find that at that moment, in those moments in the morning when I'm kind of half asleep and not really awake yet, is I'm very much less judgmental of myself,
Mm.
and I will actually put my font at like 2 so I can't read what I'm writing, and I'll just write, because otherwise I'll like, what did I mean to say that? And I'll go back and I'll change it. But I find that just to actually keep that flow going and stay in that non-judgmental headspace, I'll put my font down or dim my screen so I can't really see it. And that helps a lot.
That's cool. Wow. Mm.
You know, it's so fascinating. I mean, this is I've never heard that trick before. I mean, it's of course over the years we gather many tricks, but that's a new one for me. Do you have a really unusual writing technique trick that you use, Rob?
Um, maybe not unusual, but I will say I've become very reliant upon digital technology in recent years, especially carrying a smartphone around, you know. I say I do a lot of my writing when I'm walking, you know, just getting the wheels turning and, you know, concentrating a little more on plot details or character elements and things like that. So if I'm like walking and something comes to me and at a crosswalk and you know I pull up my phone and I'll make a note of that at that point, right? So I have a bunch of different notes files on my phone where I input details that come to me throughout the course of the day, right? And you know, prior to having a smartphone, I would have done that with a notepad or something like that. But I find it's a little more convenient just to sort of collect all this information and all these little tidbits on my phone, and then those are easily transferable to my laptop or wherever else, right? So, I mean, yeah, there are obviously drawbacks to being so connected and so plugged into the digital realm, you know, in our day-to-day lives. But at the same time, I think it's helped me sort of refine some details with my writing and maybe not necessarily become a more efficient writer, but more engaged in my story throughout the day at various intervals, right? And you know, I don't think that's unusual at all, but it's you know, I've found it's become an unusual part of my day to day, and I guess part of my person, I guess, like just you know, a trait that I sort of carry on basically every day wherever I am. And sometimes like if I wake up in the middle of the night with an idea, I'll reach for my phone and you know punch in that idea there too, right? So yeah, so in many ways, I think that's unusual compared to what my life used to be like 5-10 years ago. But you know, that's just how the writing life has evolved for me anyway.
I think we're super lucky to have this technology because look at we're all here.
Yeah, here we are for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what comes up for me as I'm listening to this? So there's sleeping and dreaming, there's walking, there is the technology. It also feels very physical and embodied. Uh, um, is that part of your process, Jenn? And is there any particular story perhaps that feels really embodied to you in your collection? Or I'm asking a question that's too out there.
No. Physical. Well, I'm not a super physical person anymore. So, let me think now. When I'm okay, well, the only physical thing I can think of is like when I'm super uptight, I can't write. So if I need to do a lot of yoga or some stretching and exercise, that kind of opens the pathways up again. If there's anything in my book, oh, I don't know. There's so many. There's bits of me in every single story, so it's really hard to pinpoint anything or give a specific example. I don't know. Can I have another question?
No, but you know what I'm thinking of is the story that comes with that beautiful intro. The story about the knitted nests. Do you want to say a little bit about that? Because to me, that feels very physical.
Oh, okay. I guess I'm not sure if I understand what you're saying, but what I can say about the physical is a lot of the characters in all of my stories have maybe psychological or physical disabilities or challenges. I don't want to say disabilities. But and I think the physicality and the palpability maybe of these characters comes from the fact that they are not always super verbal. So their lives are more seen in their actions. And somebody actually commented on one of the stories yesterday I read and said that that character didn't seem to say very much and they wanted to see some more interaction with the world. But I think that verbal way in a creative way of thinking is not always, I mean, I feel honored to be able to write because I feel like I'm not a very good speaker and I can paint and I can, get my point across a lot of different ways. So maybe that comes across Does that answer the question? I don't know.
And I have to, like, again, I'm awful for kind of like making connections between really, really far away things. But maybe that's also what makes me a writer. I'm thinking about how you're both of Indigenous ancestry, and how the whole idea of how we use language is maybe a little bit different in at least some Indigenous cultures.
Yeah.
So maybe not being so hyperverbal, for example.
Mhm.
I see you nod, Wob.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting to note. And I would totally agree with that. And I can only speak for Anishinaabe culture, of course, right? And the people that I'm descended from and the sort of land that I live upon as well. But a huge part of storytelling is that nonverbal part, right? And I think when we gather in the Anishinaabe culture, of course, sharing stories orally is a huge part of that. And we believe that should be the essence of who we are as Anishinaabe, right? And that should be the essence of our stories, and that's how we pass this down. And I wrote something recently about the importance of memory and sort of ingrain having those stories like ingrained, right? Like just sort of tattooing them onto our DNA and in our beings. But another part is just existing, with each other, existing on the land, having a solitary moment out on the land, and just feeling the environment and feeling nature, and just acknowledging your role as part of the land, and just being thankful for it as well, right? That's a huge part of who we are as Nishnawbek, and that comes through in our stories too. And it's not always about how we interact with other people or how we share stories with other people. It's what we get through various arts, whether it's songs or visual arts or everything else. And I think that is something that I've tried to reflect in different ways through the written word too. And it can be difficult, right? Like, because you're taking, these time-honored traditions of sharing stories and culture and really condensing them into this literary format that hasn't really been around for that long, relatively speaking, right? And there are these hardened
You froze, Wob.
this sort of very rigid guidelines of how we write stories and that kinds of thing. So I think thankfully now we're thinking about ways of branching out from that and reimagining how we share stories in literary realms as Indigenous people. And I think it's interesting to see these discussions happen for sure.
Mm-hmm. Does that bring up anything for you, Jenn?
I think the storytelling, it's so crucial, and we've lost such a big part of that. My family didn't grow up in the culture, and you asked me earlier who Siamalat was, and that's my ancestor Granny, who was pre-contact. And there's so few people actually in the nation that still have stories. So it's so precious. No matter how we can tell them now, exactly through painting or music or writing. And like I said, I'm just so grateful that I have this ability, that I can teach it to other people and share how to do it. So what we do have can be saved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Where and how are you teaching that to other people?
Well, with the Indigenous Writers Collective, we're going to be working with youth and having them learn how to record their elders, and use web technology, and teach them how to use other technology to save those recordings, as well as working with adults and just helping them learn how to get their stories out and published. and also just to write for themselves, to learn that skill. As in the writer's studio at Simon Fraser University as a TA, helping people hone their skills and teaching them how to move forward with that craft, which is where I met you.
Yes, that's where Jen and I met at the writer's studio. Yeah. I really like what you said about writing. I don't know exactly what your words were, but something like writing the stories for themselves. And I think that's so important, that we also learn to tell ourselves our stories.
Mhm.
Yeah. Is there something you want to say about that? Any one of you?
Well, yeah, I think that's, especially as Indigenous people, that's a really important part in the process of reclaiming our identities and our stories too, right? Because by and large, our identities have been stolen and beaten from us. And the stories really are what are reconnecting a lot of Indigenous people with their background and with their history, right? And helping them understand what existed here prior to, the arrival of European settlers and so on. So I think just telling them for the sake of themselves is a huge triumph, because these stories weren't supposed to exist anymore. Our cultural identity wasn't supposed to exist in this country any longer. That was the whole idea behind residential schools and the Indian Act and so on, right? So the fact that we are able to speak proudly of ourselves as Indigenous people and carry forward those stories is just a major victory. And you really have to, give huge credit and honor the ancestors who began that work, right? These are the kids in residential schools who, spoke the language behind the backs of the nuns and the teachers, and, met behind the school and made sure that they shared their stories with one another, and they literally risked their lives to do that, right? So because of them, once they left, they kept those stories going in those schools, and they survived as a result of that. And then you have people who would have ceremonies in their basements in the middle of the night, far away from the eyes of the Indian agent who would be there to arrest them, just for the sake of having stories, right? So yeah, just speaking them proudly and having them documented in various ways is just very amazing. And it's an honor for me as a storyteller to sort of carry on that tradition in my own humble way, right? So yeah, I would totally agree with that.
And I just want to say that, Wob, your book it's so important because it so puts us there. And it's just so, again, I overuse the word palpable, but sitting reading it, you're right there and you're cold, and it's, and that probably has a lot to do with, even though it was published 2 years ago, the fact that we've just been kind of living through it. And not too long ago, only a few months ago, the grocery store shelves were empty, and we couldn't get a can of beans. So it was, but anyways, yes, to the culture, it speaks so clearly to the culture. And yeah, that's such an important book. Well done, you.
Oh, miigwech, thank you very much. I'm honored.
Maybe this is a good point to stop for a moment and listen to some of Ranj's beautiful music.
Great idea.
Hi, my name is Ranj Singh. I'm a local singer-songwriter, and I just want to congratulate my friend Jenn Ashton on her book launch. I read People Like Frank, and what an incredible story, and it hits home on so many different levels. So thank you for that, and thank you for this opportunity to be a part of your project. I'm so proud of you. Way to go, Jenn.
This is a song I wrote called Peace. Sometimes our world turns upside down, leaves us standing here in disbelief. Now's the time you have to look inside. Find your strength and keep in mind, this is not the way life's supposed to be. Cause we were born to laugh, we were born to shine, we were born to love and to be kind, to show the world all we really need. Won't you stay a while and talk to me? You might find that I'm not like you. Because it's ignorance that makes one weak, and indifference that leaves one so confused. It don't matter if you're black or white, the clothes you wear or whose God is right. We are all one as humanity. We were born to laugh, we were born to shine, we were born to love and to be kind, to show the world all we really need. Sometimes the world turns upside down, leaves us standing here in disbelief. And that's the time we have to stand our ground, work together, work in harmony. It don't matter if you're right or wrong, what matters is the path you're on. The universe provides for you and me. And we were born to laugh, we were born to shine, we were born to love and to be kind, to show the world all we really need. Peace, peace.
That's beautiful.
Well done, Ranj.
Yay. So you probably want to learn a little bit about Ranj as well. So Ranjit or Ranj Singh makes music with a distinct Indian Western flair that draws on the singer-songwriter and self-taught guitarist, love for rock music and heartfelt lyrics, like we just heard. He refers to his unique blend of music as Indo-Canadian folk. In the mid-80s, Ranj started his career performing with many folk, Punjabi and Hindi artists in the Vancouver area. And in the 90s, he, along with his talented brothers, helped form the influential and critically acclaimed group Dal Dil Vog, where their unique style of Bhangra rock music led to tours throughout North America and India. After Dal Dil Vog disbanded, Ranj recorded 2 solo projects, Simple Man and Man Cold, and a third found a way home with his band, The Discriminators. And I also should tell you just a little bit about myself. So like Jenn and Waub, I'm a writer and write pretty much everything that's not nailed down, from short fiction to novels to nonfiction to poetry, and particularly Japanese forms like haiku and haibun. I'm also a counselor, and I'm currently working on a project that combines fiction and poetry with interviews and research on mental health and addiction. So before we have a little bit more reading, you should also know that we'll be doing a draw on various social media platforms. All you have to do is say that you're here and watching, and use the hashtag people like Frank. That's one word, hashtag people like Frank. And prizes will be Jenn Ashton's book, People Like Frank, one of Waub's books, a CD from Ranj Singh, and my book, A Bag Full of Haiku, 87 Imperfections.
Nice prizes.
Yeah.
Yay!
Excellent.
Yeah, you guys better go and Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and wherever else, and you'll hopefully get one of the prizes. Okay, let's hear a little bit more of Waub's writing.
Sure thing. So I'll read another passage from Moon of the Crested Snow, just to set it up a little bit and to give a little bit more background about this story. It's a story about a world-ending blackout through the perspective of a Northern Ontario First Nation. And after about a week or so, we'll pick it up with the main protagonists, Evan Whitesky and Nicole McLeod. At this point in the story, this community that's about 300 kilometers north of the closest city is in the dark, literally, about what's happening in the rest of the world. It's not clear why this blackout has occurred. So this community is in some ways adjusting to that, yet at the same time unsure about its own future. And then eventually some visitors arrive from the city to the south and really upset the balance of this community even further. So this is chapter 11, a brief chapter. And at this point, as mentioned, the blackout's been going on for about a week, and they're just not sure what's going to happen. So this is Evan and Nicole at home. Hey, wake up. Nicole nudged Evan again. He opened his eyes in the pitch black bedroom. He couldn't tell if he was awake or still sleeping. Evan, wake up. Her elbow in his side stirred him out of his deep sleep, but it was the tremble in her voice and her rigid body that really woke him. I'm awake, what's up? I had a really weird dream. Oh yeah? Yeah, I'm scared. He turned to face Nicole and inched closer. Come here, he said. She buried her face into his t-shirt. What was your dream? I dreamt that me and the kids were outside, she said, and we were trying to run through the snow, but it was that kind of snow that's hard on top and real powdery underneath. Nungos was on one side and Mingun was on the other. I was holding their hands real tight. I was trying to run on top of the snow, but I kept falling through every couple steps. The kids would pull me back up and we'd start running again until I fell back through. I don't know what we were running from or running to, but we had to get somewhere. You weren't around anywhere. The kids kept saying stuff like, don't worry, mommy, and we're gonna make it. But it wasn't their same voices. It was like they were elders speaking to me. They were calm. They were smiling at me every time they pulled me up from the snow. I was getting tired and they made sure I made it out of there. I was falling deeper and deeper into the snow every time the crust broke. Then I finally fell in over my head. I was struggling, trying to get up. The snow was getting in my eyes and in my mouth. I thought I was gonna suffocate. But they reached all the way down to pull me back up. This time, their hands felt bigger. Evan lay perfectly still, listening. He stroked the top of Nicole's head, soothing her while he grew increasingly frightened. She sniffled and he knew she was on the verge of crying. They pulled me all the way to the surface, up to my feet, but we weren't running anymore. We were in the middle of the bush, and there was a whole bunch of other people there. There was a fire going. Looked like a winter camping site. I turned back to face Maingan and Nungos, but I saw a young man and a young woman wearing old patched snowmobile suits. They both had long hair that flowed so beautifully. They smiled at me, and then I knew it was them. It was their kids, but they were adults all grown up. They started talking to me in the old language, but I didn't understand them. It was a place I didn't recognize. I didn't recognize anyone else there either. I was panicking. Then Nungos reached out to grab my hand. She squeezed it tight and looked into my eyes. Her eyes were so big and brown. Her cheeks were so high and proud. Her hair fell so beautifully down the sides of my face, her face. She was the strongest and prettiest young woman. Then she reached up and touched my cheek. She said, welcome home, mommy. And then I woke up. Bewitched, thank you.
I got shivers.
Wow, yeah. Wow, thank you.
I love their relationship that they have. It's so solid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was thanks. I mean, that was something really important for me to get across, and it was largely inspired by the relationship I have with my wife, and just, you know, how positive it is and how supportive she is. And, you know, just I take pride in, you know, the home and family we're building. And I'm, of course, inspired by many other people doing great things for their children and for each other. And, you know, part of the story was, I think, humanizing that part of everyday Indigenous life, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, the stories we get in mainstream media, or, you know, through popular culture even too, over the last few, you know, generations, hasn't really portrayed Indigenous people in, you know, a regular everyday life, you know. So yeah, that's what I wanted to express with that relationship specifically in the book.
Yeah, it's really beautiful and it comes through. It's really solid. Well done.
Yeah, English, Jen.
Should we go on to a little bit more blah, 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 of Jen's stuff? Can you read a little bit, Jenn?
Yeah, should I?
I guess I'm still so, you know, to be quite honest, I'm still stuck with my feet in that snow.
Yeah.
And so I'm still totally confused. Anyway, Jenn.
Okay, I'll let you pick, Isabella. Should I finish the story that I started? Or there was another one I picked because I know that you've heard it before and you liked it. So I wasn't sure if I should. What do you think?
Well, you've already teased people with mea culpa.
So continue.
Yeah, mea culpa, for sure.
Okay. All right. I would have made the perfect little hitman. A prime example would be kindergarten. This is when my first grudge came about, and I held it firmly against my chest, my teacher, and many of the girls in my class when I had to take the fall for the cohort on my first day. I had walked into this room thinking I was pretty special because my grandfather had built the church the kindergarten was housed in, but I was in for a shock. I stood in the back, watching the other girls play, too shy to come forward and pick up a toy and join in myself. It all seemed kind of silly. In the back of the room, there was a massive blue doll house, and it was the thing to be playing with. Even the boys took seats to watch the girls pretend. But when recess was over and everybody else ran away, I wasn't sure what the bell meant, and I stood there feeling everybody push past me back to the big rug where we were to gather for our next lesson. As I stood there, the teacher reprimanding me in front of the entire class for not cleaning up the dollhouse, I decided this school thing pretty much sucked. The next day, I played at going to school, but instead crouched down beside our front door and waited and picked at the peeling varnish, shivering in my leotards and my little green coat with the fur collar. My plan was to wait there until I saw the other kids pass by on their way home. A short time later, when the mailman walked up our stairs, surprised to see the small girl crouched on the porch, I put my shush finger to my lips, nervous that he would tell on me. He nodded, but to this day, I'm sure he gave me away. Because that night, my father sat me down on the piano bench and gave me a sort of lecture about lying. Life is hard when you're 4, and I already knew I was off to a bad start with authority. The end, or is it?
Or is it?
It's not.
Yeah.
So that part was true. Actually, all of that bit.
I'm just thinking about that little 4-year-old. I mean, 4-year-olds don't have a real sense of what we adults refer to as truth.
It was my own truth, and I've always lived it that way.
So you're still a 4-year-old in some ways?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen me? Oh, yeah, definitely. Although I don't think I would make a very good hitman anymore, but I'd like to say that right now.
Just imagining a 4-year-old hitman.
Well, the professional, she wasn't that much older.
Yeah, you know, that reminds me that one of, you asked some people what they would like to discuss with you. And I think one question was something like, are you just trying to be funny, or are you naturally that way?
Right. Well, I'll say this on behalf of all the Ashtons. We have a weird sense of humor. And I'm pretty sure that down the line it was always a coping mechanism. But now that I get to know my Squamish Nation family, yeah, we're all funny. Or at least we think we are. So whether that comes across or not, I don't know. Um, Although I did just have a piece published in Funny Pearls magazine in the UK, and they thought it was funny, and it was meant to be funny, and but it was also a true story. So maybe my life is just funny. I don't know. Time will tell.
I think.
Sorry. Go ahead, Bob.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think you're funny, Jen.
Oh, thanks, Bob.
So your story, so beautiful, Wob, and I'm finally kind of slowly getting my feet out of the snow. There, in that instance, there wasn't much humor. Is there humor in other of your stories, or is that not so much your thing?
I try to be humorous here and there, but I mean, yeah, coming from a family and community of pretty funny people, you know, I think that humor is natural in a lot of Anishinaabe culture and storytelling. And I try to be funny. I don't think I'm as funny as, you know, the people in my life. So whenever I do get a laugh out of people, like, I consider it a big win, and it's a huge boost to my self-esteem because, you know, and you know, I'm known now as this sort of post-apocalyptic author, right? Like, writing about the end of the world. So it's all doom and gloom in my books. But you know, I think I'm inspired by, you know, what I see happening around me, and just people using humor as a coping mechanism, as Jen mentioned. I mean, that's part of overcoming colonialism, right? And overcoming all those measures that we, you know, we're more and more familiar with nowadays. So yeah, I try to reflect that, and I try to honor that. And I think, you know, when you talk about humor as a coping mechanism, it's of course important to balance that and offer that historical context as to why we have to cope with some things, right? And why we need these jokes interspersed throughout our stories and our dialogue, you know, basically every day, right? So yeah, you know, I try to like capture these little moments that, you know, I remember from my upbringing in my community, and how people have used humor to handle very serious things, but also, you know, as a means of kinship, right? Like they always say, you know, if you're coming into a new community and you don't know anybody, as soon as they start teasing you, that's when you know you're in, right? Because they like you, you know. As soon as they start poking fun at you, that means you're approved, kind of thing, eh? So yeah, humor, you know, it sort of takes on different lives in different ways in our communities and in our stories. But you know, I do my best to try to honor that, and to try to, you know, acknowledge that and work it into the stuff that I do, as much as I can, just for that particular reason. So it's a good conversation to have, and I think an excellent element in all storytelling as well.
I know that I saw a tweet some time ago that you're working on a sequel.
Yeah, I am.
Is that got more? Is it going to be a little bit any kind of more lightness in it?
That's hard to say. You know, it's gonna be the same world. It's gonna be the same characters. You know, a little farther down the line, like many years into the future, following the end of Moon of the Crescent Snow. But I am absolutely very mindful of making it as light as possible, because you know, it is still a post-apocalyptic story, right? So, but you know, like. And it's always, you know, important to re-examine our stories and to sort of be as introspective about them as possible. And the one sort of way I perceive it as, you know, being lighter or shining a light on something is that it is reimagining a new future for Anishinaabe people and everybody else on this land too, right? And I think that's one of the virtues of dystopian or post-apocalyptic fiction, is that you can imagine a new future, and you can take elements of what you think works in humanity and hopefully amplify those in some ways as well, right?
Okay, so I'll expect some funny bits.
Yeah. I have a separate file just for like jokes and funny bits.
Perfect.
So Jen, I was my imagination got captured by Wob talking about imagining futures. Is that something that's what place does it have in your writing?
I think it's huge, you know, because especially in this book, like I said before, the characters and, you know, everybody is coming from the edge of normal, and they're all experiencing life in their own ways. And I'm hoping that by just even sharing these stories and these people's lives, um, people will be able to live a different future and maybe see themselves and normalize, be able to normalize and feel accepted. And so I guess in that way, that's a future that I imagine for people, and I hope that this book is a vehicle for them. Um, the book, I should say, is, you know, based on many years of experience with so many different kinds of people in all of my different jobs. Um, as well as parts of me. And I think we just need to be accepting of everybody. And yeah, I hope this book helps us get there.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm seeing now is perhaps that Wob, your book is about imagining futures. Excuse me. For a group of people, and I'm sorry about this. And Jen, yours is about imagining futures for. Thank you for the water. Imagining futures for individuals. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
And
interested to. Oh, sorry to interrupt.
yeah,
But
no, you go ahead.
yeah, just Jen, you know, all the people you come across with in your jobs and that you've met over the years. How you touch on this a bit with what you just said, but how influential is that when you sit down to actually craft characters? Like, you know, are there elements of real people in each of them? Is that how your creative process works in a way?
Well, as I said before, I would say that 98% of my writing is not me thinking about it. It literally just, it's the same as painting. I just splash paint with no plan. So, and it comes out of me. And I think writing is the same way. So I know that everybody I meet is in there somewhere and it's all connected in some way. And there are bits of people here and there um, that I've met. And then maybe, you know, when I'm writing about a character, it's probably during the editing where I use that. Um, and and probably refine the characters more, and maybe that's where the influence comes in a little bit more, and I'll put some memories in there too, maybe memories of place also, and time. I think those are the kinds of things that happen during editing where I just try and sharpen the picture and increase the focus. So who some brilliant writer said the writing happens during editing, and I feel that's the way. Once it kind of gets out of me onto the page, and then I'll leave it and then go back to it. And yeah, I guess that's probably what happens. It goes, once it gets filtered through, some more comes out. But there's no, I don't think, except with the exception of stuff that's actually happened to me, like that last piece, there's nothing like about somebody in particular.
You just said, like, it's just like with painting, you just splash paint onto the canvas. So there's some splashings here behind you. You do some pretty awesome splashing, I have to say.
Thank you.
So there's yeah, there's some special splashing that's happening there. It's and maybe it goes back to what we were saying in the beginning. about this whole unconscious process that you started off talking about, is that somehow looks like your unconscious really, really knows what she's doing. Yeah.
I'll tell her you said so. That's the thing, right? You have to trust yourself. And I think that's where the judgment comes in. You really can't judge your work. I know people who get stopped up and, completely clogged up and blocked and can't write. And I think that's because it's a constant part of it is a constant judgment coming down. Who's going to read that? That sentence is terrible. I can't do this. You just have to really shut that off.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's a different place you have to reach to, I think.
Mm-hmm. Have you dealt with writer's block, Bob?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. On a regular basis. Maybe almost every day, but that's where sort of stepping away from the laptop really comes in handy, and going out for that walk, or just going outside for a little bit, or doing some sort of activity that'll totally take my mind off the actual writing process. That's when I do that. And I find, I'll come back, an hour later, and then I'll have that block worked out in my head, and things will start proceeding once again, right? And I think that's always going to happen. That's just maybe how my brain works, or maybe how everybody's brains work, and I think it's just a matter of being aware of it, and being aware of what positive sort of solutions for it as well, so it happens almost every day for me.
Wob, do you ever try and write something in a different genre just to get yourself moving again? Like, have you ever written poetry?
Not well. I've tried, yeah. But yeah, I think like being experimental definitely helps, just getting away from, the format that you've committed to, and the story that you're sort of trying to work out. Again, just as a departure for your own head, right? So yeah, I wouldn't say that I would dabble in poetry that often, but if I need to take a break and just try something totally different, that will get my mind off my current issue, and then I'll be able to get back to it after. And that's a really important point to raise, though, is like, finding a positive, creative way to work through, the problem that you may be having, right? And I think that's a great idea for sure.
And problems not just about writing, but anything.
Anything.
I find that there's always a workaround.
Yeah, for sure.
Remember that, kids.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great way to end this. There's always a workaround. Absolutely. So we have a few more minutes. I think you have some announcements, Jenn.
Yes. I want to let you know that the Massy Books / Massy Art Society is allowing me to take over their Instagram on November 1st. So I'll be there for the day, manning the comments section and posting up lots of goodies. And I'll also be giving away 2 manuscript consultations. And this is not for a big manuscript, but I'll give you an hour and I'll help you out. So there will be 2 prizes. All you have to do is leave some comments or ask me some questions, and we'll have a chat. And I think it's going to be fun. So that's November 1st at Massy Arts Society on Instagram. And also just a quick reminder to hashtag this, hashtag people like Frank. It will probably be on the screen somewhere. And to get in to win some book and CD prizes from us today. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Jenn. Is there anything that you'd like to announce, Rob?
No, I'd just like to say congratulations to Jenn on the launch of her book. It's a wonderful collection. I was very honored to be a part of this. So thank you very much to Miigwech for inviting me to read and chat with you both. And Isabella, thank you very much for your wonderful questions and this great conversation. And Ranj, I really appreciated the tunes too. Beautiful music. And I hope everybody has a great fall, a nice, calm, restful winter. And we'll emerge in the spring, I think, to, fingers crossed, somewhat regular, normal world that, is close to what we once knew pre-pandemic, right? So I'm always an optimist. I want to be hopeful. And again, Chimigwech, thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of this.
OTM.
Thank you. So information about all of this and more will be in the comments. And so I also want to thank you all again, like Jenn, Waub, Ranj, and everybody joining in tonight. And to end it, we'll have another song from Ranj Singh.
And thank you, Isabella. You're awesome.
It's a song I wrote called I'm Still Me. Life's a mystery, my friend. Sometimes we lose, sometimes we win. One wrong turn has led me here. I will ride this storm and bury all my fears. I will ride this storm and never show my fear. As I live my life in the faster lane, now I'm walking in the slower lane, but that's alright, 'cause I'm alright with me. I miss the life I used to live, but I have so much more to give, and I just wish everyone could see what I see. That I'm still me. I may not remember, but I won't forget. Memories are somewhere in my head, and I may not know the words to this song, but I'll smile and I'll pretend to sing along. I will grace you with my smile and sing along. And I'm sorry if my words aren't clear. I'm still the same and I'm still here. Don't need no pity, I don't need your tears. Just give me a moment of your time. Hear my words and you will find so much more, so much more in me. Then you will see that I'm still me. You will see that I'm still me. Can't you see?